Next, I'd like to talk about brushes. The coolest thing about brushes is if you get good at playing brushes, it actually improves your stick technique. A little known realization by many drummers, something that Jeff Hamilton pointed out in an article many years ago. And I agreed because I've spent a lot of time playing the brushes. Learning how to control a big bundle of wires is quite different than a nice piece of stiff wood. So I want to talk about a few things about brushes. The first thing is I'm using the Jeff Hamilton signature model because of the gauge of wire is heavy. You can hear this. If you were to take any brush and just fan your fingers across it, you could tell that some of them are much thinner and lighter. There's nothing wrong with that, but this produces a larger sound because it's a more coarse, if you will, wire, where the thinner wire, as you can imagine, produces a thinner sound. This one also bounces. If you let it go, there's enough stiffness to the wire where it actually helps you with some rebound. Comparing brushes to sticks. Brushes are pretty short compared to sticks. So when you're holding your brush, I think it's important to have the little wire ring at the end be a part of your grip. Now, I like to use what sometimes is called the French grip. The thumb is on top. The main thing is that I like to have the brush just resting on my finger, and then I can press down on it if I want. But basically, I'm trying to guide it. I'm holding very, very loose, trying to allow the brush to travel in my hand, kind of similar to the stick that's moving on the vertical, but this is moving on the horizontal, side to side. I'm going to start by playing a ballad pattern. The main thing is to use as much of the drum head as possible. So if I'm playing like a slow ballad, which is generally the first place a drummer ends up grabbing a pair of brushes is when they have to play a slow ballad. So I'm just thinking in circles, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. My fingers in my right hand, you can see, are kind of on each beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. This kind of puts a little point, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. My right brush is more toward the northern hemisphere. The left brush is more toward me, more right on 12 o'clock, left on 6. However, I can reverse that, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or mix it up, 1, 2, 3. But notice if I play these little small circles, 2, 3, it just doesn't sound very full. 2, 3 and 4, oops. Sometimes you'll get it close to the edge and you'll catch these wires, which brings me to the next point. How wide or narrow do you want the fan? This is personal preference. I don't like it all the way, and I don't want it to be too tight, so again, just right. So I don't want it to be catching on the hoops. It just takes some time. I practiced brushes away from the drum set. I was a student of Jeff Hamilton's for a while, and I worked on all his brush stuff, and he recommended that. So you can get your brush playing so happening that you really don't need the rest of the kit. Plus, then you'll just spend more time focusing on your sound. So my hands are moving in opposite directions. I'm keeping my hands as low as possible so I get more wire instead of up here like this. You can get lots of wire. I'm trying to allow the brushes to move in my hands. You might notice that my left hand actually cups and caresses the brushes, as opposed to holding the brushes tight and then pivoting from your shoulders. That's a method, but I prefer to relax my arms. You can hear I'm doing all kinds of shading. You get out near the edge, the shading is higher, it's darker in the middle. So when you play on the whole surface, you really take advantage of all the different colors of the drum. Here's this technique called trilling. It's one of those things that almost has to be caught. It can't be taught, where you hold your hand and you try to learn how to get that movement happening. It works great on ballads. You can put the brush on the cymbal and do a thing like that. I use the wire ends for scrapes, as you'll see in the ballads. I like to play all these colors up here. Sometimes I'll play with the rubber handles. So if I don't have time to switch to mallets and I'm playing a ballad and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, I can build up a big cymbal swell with that. So ballads is a great place to start because that's where you really learn to play very relaxed, learn how to get a brush sound. There's some great videos on the internet that you can watch on brush technique as well. Now I'm going to talk about the all-purpose stroke that you're going to come across in the book, because this one is basically like if I was to count off a tune, 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 1. Toss frisbee, toss frisbee, toss frisbee. If you're going to toss a frisbee, dang, dang. So I throw my brush out on 2 and 4, and then I come over on a 1, a 3. So a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3. Now I can actually drag my right brush, imitating a 2-beat hi-hat. So I try to keep the brushes on the head as much of the time as possible. That was simply this. A 1, 2, 3, 4, a 1, 2, a 3, 4. I'm just filling in. You might notice that the snares are off, see? I'll play with the snares on. Now I'll take them off. Back on. Back off. The drum just has a little more bottom end. When you don't have the snares on, I can hear the difference, and especially for ballads where oftentimes there's these nice, long, low, sustaining bass notes that can really create that buzz factor on the snare drum. I usually take the snares off between tunes sometimes when people are tuning or people are playing sounds, because even if I'm not playing the snare drum, as long as the snare wires are on, if there's these tones around, you get all these buzzing sounds. So the snare drum's still being played, whether you're hitting it or not, until you turn off the snares. So that's an important thing to consider. You're going to see some different kinds of movements as I play the tracks. Generally with the ballad, if I'm playing that slow, I'm either subdividing triplets or subdividing eighth notes. So the 12/8 ballad, I'd be thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and Notice how I hit the cymbal. Not with the top of the brush, because you can hear that doesn't have enough weight to produce much sustain and sound, but I hit right about here on the edge, or sometimes I'll even use the rubber if I want a little bit more sound. But often I just play on the edge like that. Scrapes, it's important to have cymbals that allow you to create that sound. Some of these non-lathe rides, which are a little dry for my taste, they don't have enough texture, so you really don't have the option of utilizing these pretty colors. So those are some things that I like to have access to those different colors. One more aspect about playing the ballads is that they can also be in regular eighth notes. So I would be subdividing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4. I think it's very important when you're playing ballads to not play with your heel up on the hi-hat stand. The reason is because you get this sound, which to me is too anxious. Hurry, hurry. Should be more laid back. 2. Hear how long that sound is? 1. Even doing stuff like this, where I sizzle it by closing the cymbals gently but not firmly. So you either have to be subdividing eighth notes if it's in an eighth note subdivision or the triplet. And you would want to do that anyways, just because slow tempos are difficult to keep slow and steady. So if you're subdividing, and then that is the way you keep time. So the slower the tempo, the more you need to subdivide. The faster the tempo, the less likely you will need to subdivide as much.